Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Naruto X Violet? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content, and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the King Namikaze for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. Naruto watched as Sasuke charged a Chidori. But because of the curse mark, the Chidori changed into a black-silver color. Naruto charged his Rasengan, and because of the Nine-Tails chakra, the ball turned red. Both stared at each other, preparing the attack that would change everything. Suddenly both lunged at each other from the sides of the Valley of the End. Rasengan! Chidori! Their attacks causing a shockwave of power to erupt. Both attacks seemed equal in power, neither overpowering the other. Then suddenly a void of their chakra appeared. Sasuke took the opportunity to thrust his attack into Naruto's heart as Naruto scratched his friend's headband. The giant ball of chakra expanded, destroying part of the valley as it exploded. However, something happened. Both attacks were too powerful, and this resulted in dimensional rift opening. Seeing this, Sasuke grabbed Naruto by his neck and threw him into the rift just before it closed. Just as it closed, it caused a massive shock wave that sent Sasuke hurtling into a wall, knocking him unconscious. Just as everything settled, Kakashi appeared. He looked around hoping to find his two students, but he could only find one. "I was too late," he said in a somber tone. The first thing Naruto knew, when he woke up, was that he was no longer in the Valley of the End. All he could see was white walls and medical equipment, a hospital. Perfect, he thought with disdain as he looked around. Looking at the wires that were on his body, he quickly removed them, which caused all the machinery to go haywire. He ignored it as he looked out of the window, only to widen his eyes in shock. "Where the hell am I?" he asked out loud, seeing all the tall buildings and vehicles. Footsteps could be heard running down the hall towards his room, so deciding to leave, Naruto grabbed his belongings that were on the chair next to him and jumped out of the window. Unfortunately, it was then that Naruto realized he couldn't access chakra to climb down the building, but he was luckily on the second floor and just landed on some grass. "There he is!" shouted a doctor that looked out of Naruto's hospital room. Deciding now was not the time to figure out why he can't use chakra, Naruto randomly chose a direction and ran. Eventually coming across an alley, he bolted into it and hid behind a dumpster before calming himself down. "Okay, I'm in a village that I don't know. There are huge buildings that are bigger than the ones in the Rain Village. Or at least the pictures I've seen. And now I'm hiding from people that probably want to torture me for answers," listed Naruto out loud before shrugging. Still nicer than the village. Looking down at himself, he saw that he was still in a hospital gown. Without waiting, he took it off and put on his orange jumpsuit pants, but couldn't find the coat. "Only the shirt, at least I have that," he muttered as he put it on. Looking at the headband, he sighed before putting it in his pocket. With nothing else to do, he walked out and wandered the streets, looking amazed at everything. Where did he go? "He has to be around here somewhere," spoke a doctor that ran around the corner. Thankfully, Naruto heard him and quickly went the other way. "There!" shouted the doctor, just seeing Naruto walk around a corner. "Damn!" said Naruto before running again. Seeing another alley, he quickly ran into it, only to see a dead end. "Maybe they won't find me here." As if the world was against him, he went into the alley. "There's no way out." "Now that's just not fair," Naruto shouted before trying to look for a way to escape. The only thing he could see was a small vent that looked like he could barely fit in. Hearing the doctor and others getting closer, Naruto decided it was better than nothing, so he ran to the vent and tried to pry the grate off, but it wouldn't budge. He then grabbed to the top of it before jumping and slamming his feet to the grate, but still nothing. The footsteps continued to get louder as Naruto put all of his strength into kicking the gate. Gritting his teeth, Naruto tried one last kick. Just as his feet touched the grate, something happened and he now found himself landing on his back on the building's roof. "What the hell?" he groaned out, not expecting anything like. Getting up, he slowly walked over to the building's edge and looked down, seeing the doctors look around. "Guess I was wrong," he heard faintly before they left. Sighing, Naruto sat down and rested as he gathered his thoughts on what happened. Glancing at the vent, he tried to figure out how managed to get to the roof in a second from the ground. Standing again, he walked over to it and looked at it from every angle. "How did I do it?" he asked himself before sitting on top of it. Was it the kicking? Deciding to try, he stood on the vent and jumped up and down multiple times, trying to imagine himself going through it. After nothing happened for 10 minutes, he thought maybe I could try something like channeling my chakra. It's better than doing nothing, so with a sigh, he stood and concentrated. Within seconds he nodded to himself and jumped. This time he watched as smoke appeared from him and forced his body through the vent and back to the bottom. Only this time it didn't stop until he slammed into the wall opposite. Well, at least that worked, Naruto muttered after peeling himself from the wall. Looking at his hands, he raised an eyebrow before looking back at the vent. I'll test this theory later, he muttered as he left the alley and walked in another random direction. This is going to be fun. The next day, wandering around the city, Naruto managed to memorize the place in his mind and could easily find his way anywhere. Deciding to learn more about the city that he was in, which he found out was called Metroville, he went to the city's library. He spent hours inside, learning all he could as he read multiple books. It was also one of the times he wished he could use shadow clones. Thinking of that, it made him think of his new abilities and how he managed to go through a vent. After another few hours he left the library and walked through the city. He eventually found himself in an open field and nodded to himself when he saw that it was secluded. It didn't take long for Naruto to find a few bushes to practice with as he stared in concentration. Just like last time, he thought, channel my energy, and passed through the bush. Nodding to himself, he ran at the bush and jumped towards it. Unfortunately, a dog barked nearby and made Naruto lose his concentration, causing him to collide with the bush and into the tree. Why? Shouted Naruto in a comical manner after getting up. Help! Screamed a female voice from nearby. Hearing this, Naruto went on autopilot and ran as fast as he could to the source of the voice. He eventually came across another alley and looked at the end, seeing a man mugging a woman. Growling, Naruto unconsciously used his new powers and dashed towards the man, knocking him into a wall. Get away from her! Shouted Naruto as he stood before him. The man stood up and wobbled a little before standing and shaking his head. Get lost, kid, the man said as he looked at Naruto. This doesn't concern you. Like hell it does! Shouted Naruto as he ran at the man. But because of his loss of chakra, he couldn't run as fast and was backhanded by the man and into the side of a dumpster. Struggling to stand, Naruto heard the woman cry out as the man started to stalk closer to her. Looking around for anything to help him, Naruto spotted some chains hanging from the dumpster. Quickly grabbing it, Naruto used his powers again unconsciously, as he swung the chain at the man. The chain glowed black and red as wisps of smoke appeared from it before hitting the man across the chest and sending him flying into a wall, knocked out. Panting heavily at what just happened, he slowly turned to the woman and walked over to her. Are you alright? He asked, catching his breath, not noticing that the chain wrapped itself around his wrist. Thankfully, the woman didn't see anything as she nodded with tears in her eyes. Thank you, she said. Thank you so much? No problem, said Naruto as he helped the woman up. Did he hurt you? My leg, she said, gesturing to her left leg as she stood on her right. I think it might be broken. She then took a phone out of her bag that was lying next to her. I need to call the police and ambulance. Naruto furrowed his brows. Ambulance? What's that? He thought in confusion. He watched as the woman pressed a few buttons before talking to it. After a few minutes, Naruto could hear a couple loud noises getting closer and closer until he saw two vehicles appear. A team of people in different uniforms ran into the alley as another asked Naruto and the woman a few questions. This lasted for a while as Naruto had to lie about his powers, and to be honest, all the questions were annoying him. When the questions were over, another man walked to Naruto. Can I help you? Asked Naruto as he looked at the aged man. Yes, my name is Rick Dicker. He then looked around. May I talk to you privately? Naruto eyes the man for a moment before slowly nodding. They walked until they were on a street with barely anyone there. As I said before, my name is Rick Dicker. I work for a government called the National Supers Agency. I had a talk with the man that is being arrested, and he told me what he saw. Now Naruto was getting nervous. What did he see? Rick looked straight into Naruto's eyes. That you had powers. He stopped as Naruto began making excuses that didn't make sense. Try to deny it all you want. We have ways of seeing anything, and we saw you use your powers. Naruto sighed, seeing no point in lying any further. Alright, what do you want? I want to know where you came from, stated the man. A few days ago, you never existed. We have never seen you before. But yesterday, you showed up out of nowhere. Naruto sighed again before explaining everything he knew and where he came from. I'm getting too old for this, Rick sighed. Naruto looked at Rick. So what's going to happen now? Sighing, Rick answered, well, I'm going to have to either set you up in an orphanage, but that might not end well, so I'll put you in an apartment. The government will handle the rent and bills, so don't worry. I'll also have to send you to school, otherwise you'd be the only 14-year-old who doesn't go to school, and you'll be going in a couple of days. We'll give you a test tomorrow to see what grade you should be. This will also give you chance to know about this world and everything about it. He's just like old man Hokage, thought Naruto as he stared at the man with a small smile. Now follow me, your apartment was already set up. We had it ready for when we would meet, said Rick as he led Naruto to a small limo. They didn't have to drive for long as they came across a very large building with very large windows. They went inside and into an elevator. I forgot to ask, but do you have any questions? It must seem odd that a complete stranger is helping you out of nowhere. Naruto nodded and thought for a moment. Are you going to keep my powers a secret? I'd rather no one knew about this. What about other supers? Asked Rick with a raised eyebrow. Seeing a confused look at the word, Rick elaborated, people with powers like you. Nodding again, he said, yeah, for now at least. Wait, there are others like me? The elevator opened and they walked into a nice-looking hallway. There are others. In fact, the person you'll be living across from is also a super, Rick said before pulling out a key and opening a door. This is now your home. At first glance, Naruto could easily say that the apartment was a lot better than the one in Konoha. Rick told him that it had 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. The kitchen was connected to the living room and both were bigger than Naruto's old apartment. There was also another room, but it was empty, and Naruto was told he could do anything with it. Any more questions? Yes, said Naruto. Where's the ramen? 2 days later. After being introduced to his apartment, Naruto was given a small sum of money and went shopping for new clothes. He now wears black jeans with his headband, now a belt, black and orange shoes, a short orange shirt that had the sleeves ending just past his elbows, and a black hoodie that had short sleeves. The chains were wrapped around his wrist, and it seemed that barely anyone noticed it. He walked through his kitchen and grabbed an apple before putting his shoes on and grabbing a black satchel with schoolbooks inside. He left his apartment and locked it, waving to his neighbor, whose name was Lucius. They met the other day and quickly hit it off, joking and helping one another if they come across the other. After leaving the apartment complex, Naruto walked towards the school thinking about his powers. I still need to train in them. Don't want to turn into smoke by accident and cause a panic, he thought as he entered school grounds. Looking at the building, he saw it was called Western View Junior High. Going inside the building, he was greeted by the school's receptionist. Hello there, how can I help you? She asked. Remembering that he was to hand her a sheet, Naruto got the piece of paper from his bag. I was told to give this to you and that you would give me my locker and class number. The woman took the paper and quickly read it. After a minute she nodded and typed a few things in her computer. Okay, Mr. Uzumaki, nice name, she commented, making Naruto grin sheepishly and rub the back of his head. Your class is just down the hall. Give your teacher this note and he'll let you in, she said, pointing down the corridor. She gave him another piece of paper that told him his locker and class number. Seeing that it was already near lunchtime, Naruto decided to go to class first, which only took him a few minutes to reach. Knocking on the door, he opened it and entered the classroom, making everyone quiet down and stare. Can I help you? Asked the teacher. Quickly giving the teacher the note, he waited. All right, he said before turning to the class. We have a new student joining us today. He then turned to Naruto. Why don't you introduce yourself to everyone? Nodding, Naruto turned to the class and gave a small wave. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. Glad to be here. Good, said the teacher, ignoring the class murmuring about the new boy. The only seat that we have available is at the back. Violet, can you please raise your hand to help Naruto here to his seat? Looking at the back, Naruto saw a hand hesitantly raised to the air, allowing him to see where he was supposed to go. Walking to it, Naruto could faintly hear people whisper, he has to sit next to her. I feel sorry for him. Being stuck to sit next to Invisigirl, Naruto sat down and looked at Violet, the girl he was sitting next to. She wore a thick dark blue jeans, and had black hair that almost covered her face. If Naruto didn't know any better, he'd say that she was trying to avoid getting noticed and that she was pretty. Hi, Naruto greeted to the girl, who looked at him in shock. What? Nothing, she replied in a quiet voice as she turned away with a small blush. The class continued talking and Naruto watched as people looked at him with pity. He heard what some of them were saying and saw that a few of the things were causing Violet to flinch slightly, which was making him angry. Before he could do anything, he heard the bell go off and saw everyone quickly pack his or her belongings and leave. He looked at Violet, only to see that she was already gone, so he shrugged and left. Going outside, Naruto looked around before spotting a tree that everyone seemed to not notice. He walked over to it and climbed it until he was sitting on a large branch that he saw was out of view from everyone else. Going through his bag, Naruto took out his lunch and started eating whilst looking through some random books he had. After a while, a sound caught Naruto's attention, so he moved along the branch and moved some leaves to peer out. Looking, he saw a couple of girls picking on another. Who he saw was Violet. "Why am I so angry?" he thought as he gritted his teeth. He had to calm himself down as he saw a few smoke wisps float around his hand. Taking a deep breath, Naruto left his bag as he jumped down the tree and then approached the group of girls. "What the hell are you doing?" he growled out. One girl stepped forward as the other two followed. "Don't worry. We're just telling her to stay away from you," she said in an arrogant tone. "You should be thanking us." Naruto grit his teeth in anger and took another deep breath. "Get lost before I do something that I won't regret," he threatened. Fortunately, the girls caught the message and quickly ran away. Walking up to Violet, making her realize that he was a little taller than her, he saw that she was staring at him in shock again. "You okay?" Violet nodded before realizing that she was staring. Looking away with a large blush, Violet made her hair cover her face. "Thank you," she stuttered in a shy manner. Thinking for a second, Naruto could easily tell that Violet didn't have a lot of friends, if any at all. So that would mean she probably eats alone as well. Smiling, Naruto asked, "Would you like to have lunch with me?" He then pointed to the tree he was eating at. Shocked again, Violet could only nod as she tried to process what happened in the last 5 minutes. They walked to the tree and Naruto climbed up first before helping Violet up. Throughout lunch, both became great friends and learned a lot about the other. Violet learned that Naruto is an orphan and lives in an apartment by himself, likes ramen and orange, and that he doesn't like vegetables and bullying. Naruto learned that Violet has 2 brothers and parents, she likes reading and music, and she doesn't like bullies or being different. Even when lunch ended and they went back to class, they continued to talk through the rest of the day without anyone noticing. When the bell signaled for the end of the day, both walked outside. Violet saw her crush walk by but for some reason didn't react like she usually did, and it confused her. They continued to talk until they both saw a car stop by them and Violet sighed, knowing it was her car. "Bye, Naruto," she said with a smile. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said back as she entered her car. He noticed that, who he presumed to be the mother, was looking at him with a look that made Naruto feel uneasy, like a lot of teasing was going to happen for no reason at all. Shaking his head, he walked away, not hearing the conversation going on inside the car. "So, who was that?" asked Helen, Violet's mother, with a tone of voice that made Violet slightly nervous. He just transferred and we became friends," said Violet, refusing to look her mother in the eyes. "Really?" asked Helen with a knowing smirk, making Violet blush in embarrassment. "So, what's his name?" Violet glanced at her mother before answering. "Naruto." "With Naruto." As he walked back to his apartment, Naruto couldn't stop smiling. He had just made his first friend, well, first friend his age at least. And he did have to admit, she was pretty. Suddenly stopping, Naruto wondered where that thought came from before shrugging and continued walking. After reaching his apartment, Naruto hung his bag up and smiled. "Now would be perfect for training my powers," he muttered to himself as he left once again and walked all the way to the open field that he was in the other day. When he arrived, he looked around and made sure there was no dog or anyone else as he moved some bushes. Standing a few yards away, he stared at the bush and concentrated. He waited until everything was absolutely quiet and then he ran forward. Just before reaching the bush, he dove forward and watched in amazement as his body turned into smoke and embers and passed through the bush. On the other side, his body was reformed and couldn't stop the grin from growing. "That was awesome!" he shouted in excitement. He stayed in the field for hours until there was no more sunlight. He was now slowly walking home with a tired look. "You got here late," commented Lucius as he looked at Naruto from his door. "What were you doing?" "Training," said Naruto. "You know, like exercise." He then went into his apartment and closed the door. Sighing, he made his dinner and then went straight for bed. 2 weeks later. Not much happened during the past 2 weeks. Naruto continued going to school and being with his friends, Violet. The two's friendship only grew during that time. They both even developed crushes on the other, without the other knowing. Because of this, Naruto became really confused when Violet would blush and act very shy when they were alone. People even tried to talk to the both of them now, but most were ignored because they were girls, trying to steal Naruto from Violet. At that time, Naruto also learned that Violet could be quite possessive even though it confused him. Also, during the 2 weeks Naruto continued to train in his powers and discovered a few things, mainly by accident. He found out that he could absorb smoke to gain some strength, and that he could fire off balls of ash. He can also smoke dash for a longer distance, but that takes quite a bit of energy. Right now, he was walking to Violet's house because the family invited him over for dinner. He rung the doorbell and stood nervously. This would be the first time he would be meeting his crush's family, and he had a feeling that something was going to happen. He didn't have to wait long as he heard a young boy's voice from the other side of the door. "I'll get it." The door then opened to show a 10-year-old with blonde hair and blue eyes. "Hi, are you Naruto?" he asked with a smile that was filled with mischievous. Looked at him for a second, and I can already tell he'll make an excellent prankster, thought Naruto, as so many evil plans formed in his head. He shook his head before smiling. "Yeah," he said before entering the house. "I'm Dash," said the 10-year-old. "Nice to meet you," greeted Naruto as 2 others entered the room. He knew the woman was the mother after seeing her a few times in her car, but she was also holding a baby. The other man, Naruto gulped at because of the size of him. He also had blonde hair and blue eyes, but he was quite large in his size. What freaked Naruto out the most was the glare the man was sending him. "Hello, my name is Helen. This is my youngest son, Jack," she said, showing the baby in her arms, "and this is my husband, Bob," introduced the mother, elbowing her husband to greet the teen. Bob stepped forward and raised his hand, wanting to shake hands with the boy. "So you are my daughter's friend?" Naruto hesitantly raised his own hand and clasped it with the older man. "And nice to meet you, sir." His left eye twitched as he felt Bob's hand squeeze his a bit painfully. Not wanting to be outdone, Naruto used every ounce of strength he had and squeezed Bob's hand. Bob smirked when he felt this and quickly let go. He called his son. "Go get your sister." Quickly walked, minding his powers, towards Violet's room. "Please," spoke Helen, "come and sit at the table. I'll go get the food." Naruto nodded and walked to the table before sitting down with Bob following. They sat silently as Helen brought in some food and Naruto drooled at the sight of it. Then walked in and was then followed by Violet, who seemed just as nervous as Naruto and kept trying to tuck her hair behind her left ear. "Hi," said Naruto with a smile, one that Violet returned. Naruto stayed silent during the dinner, not knowing what to say, and the same was happening for Violet. Helen looked at Naruto, and he became nervous when he saw her look. "So, how did you and Violet meet?" she asked. Everyone stopped eating at that and looked at Naruto before glancing at Violet, seeing that she was blushing madly. She looked down at her hands and saw they were invisible, so she took a deep breath, and they became visible again. Naruto sat nervously before answering. "On my first day I was to sit next to her." Everyone but Violet waited for Naruto to say more. "But he didn't, that's it?" asked Helen in disbelief. Mom warned Violet, but she didn't hear her daughter. Sighing, Naruto continued, "We didn't really talk, but during lunch I saw Violet being bullied by a few girls. I scared them off and we became friends after that." He looked at everyone for their reactions. Helen looked at him with a smile and a teasing look. Bob looked angry but at least thankful towards him. Didn't seem to care much, but Naruto could tell he was at least a little thankful. Finally, Naruto looked at Violet and saw he trying to concentrate on something else, but the blush on her face was not making it easy. No one noticed the evil smirk come across Dash's face before he spoke up, catching everyone's attention. "Ah, Violet was saved by the one she loves." Hearing this, Naruto flushed in embarrassment, and looked away in fear as he saw Bob's heated glare. Dash burst out laughing and Jack just did the same. However, it was Violet's reaction that caught Naruto's attention and made everyone quiet. The second Dash said that sentence, she turned invisible, save for her clothes, and ran out of the room. Bob and Helen looked at each other, glanced at Naruto, and then glared at Dash. "Whoops," said a very sheepish Dash. Bob looked at Naruto. "I guess you're wondering why she turned invisible," he said with a tired and sad sigh, thinking this might lead his family to relocate lives again. "Don't worry. I'll keep it a secret. We all have our secrets," said Naruto, surprising everyone. "But Violet, as she wasn't in the room, so, you guys are all supers?" he asked, getting nods. "I run fast," said Dash, happy he can show his powers as he ran around the table. This surprised Naruto. When he's older he could be as fast as Lee without the weights, he thought. "Do you two have powers?" he asked the parents. Instead of answering, Bob lifted the table with one hand and Helen stretched to his side. Whoa was all Naruto could say. After putting the table down, Bob sat as Helen asked Naruto a question. You're really going to keep this a secret? Why? Smiling, Naruto answered, like I said, we all have our secrets. He then looked around. Is it okay if I go see Violet? No, answered Bob instantly, making Helen glare at him. Bob warned Helen, making Bob sweat slightly before he turned away. Helen smiled at Naruto and nodded towards the hallway. It's the second door to the left, she said. Thank you, said Naruto as he left the room. He walked down the hall and looked at all the family photos, smiling. He reached the second door in a matter of seconds and waited for a moment, not knowing why. Taking a deep breath, he knocked twice and waited. Still nothing, so he knocked again, but still nothing happened. Taking hold of the doorknob, he turned it and opened the door. Looking around the room, he saw it was an average girl's room. Posters on the wall, a large closet full of clothes, and a lot of fashion magazines and books lying around the room. Noticing the bed, he saw Violet sitting on it with her knees on her chest. Are you alright? Asked Naruto, noticing that Violet flinched. What are you doing here? She asked without looking at him. Did he come to make fun of me now? She thought sadly. Naruto shook his head. Even though Violet couldn't see it, I just came to see if you were alright. You ran away earlier and I got concerned. Violet was happy that he couldn't see her face, otherwise he'd be able to see her blush. Hesitantly, Violet lifted her head and looked Naruto in the eyes. He saw that her eyes were filled with fear, and he knew this from his own past. So this is what she meant by afraid of being different, he thought before sitting down next to her. They stayed silent for a few minutes, not knowing what to say. That is, until Violet broke that silence. Are you afraid of me? She asked, her voice quivering slightly. No, said Naruto with a smile. After a second, I know what it's like being different, so I know it can be terrifying at times. Your family explained everything to me. He then chuckled. Now that I know you can turn invisible, it explains why I thought I saw you randomly for a second, but then you disappear the next. Violet smiled at that. I told your family that I would keep this a secret. Why? She asked, surprised that he would do that. Then again, he is Naruto, she thought. As I said to your family, even I have my secrets, he said, smiling. He then stood up and took her hand in his, making her stand as well. Now let's go back to your family. They walked back and Naruto barely heard what Violet as she whispered thank you. The rest of the night was spent peacefully. Everyone was happy, and even though the family secret was revealed, everything was better, like a weight was lifted. Naruto and Violet even grew closer to each other because of this. When it was time to leave, Naruto said goodbye to the family and was told that he could come by any time. Violet gave Naruto a hug and kissed his cheek, outside without anyone seeing, and quickly ran inside from embarrassment. Standing there in a daze for a moment, Naruto shook his head with a smile before walking back to his apartment, using vents as a shortcut. The next day. It was the same as any other day for Naruto. He got up, did his morning routine, left his apartment, went to school, and hung out with Violet. He sighed, wishing for something to happen. Just as he was thinking of doing a prank, the bell went off and everyone left. Violet waited outside as Naruto went to his locker. When he left the building, he saw his friend standing nervously next to the steps. Suddenly getting a devious idea, he slowly walked to her from the steps, glad that her back was to him, and then grabbed her shoulders. She gave a short scream, letting go of all her books, before quickly ducked and turning invisible. Hearing laughter, she turned visible and glared at Naruto. That wasn't funny. Just keeping you on your toes, he said before looking around. It's a good thing no one saw. He then saw that she was back to being nervous again. Are you okay? Violet just stared at her feet again, not looking at Naruto, as a blush was present on her face. Trying to find something that would distract her, she began to pick up her books as she spoke. I was wondering if, urged Naruto as he helped by picking up the final book. If you would like to have. She was suddenly interrupted when a horn went off, signaling that her family was waiting for her. Sighing in defeat, she looked at Naruto. I'll see you tomorrow, she said before running away. Naruto just stood there, confused, completely wonder what she was going to say. He muttered before remembering that he still had one of her books. I'll give it to her after I do my training tonight, he thought before walking away. Instead of going to the apartment, Naruto went straight to his field and began to train. Deciding to practice with his chain, he unwrapped it and began to concentrate his abilities into it before slashing at a tree. He did this, Without noticing that it was now dark out, I was out here for a while, he said when he finally realized the time. Getting his stuff together, he walked home again, enjoying the nice cold air. Suddenly, tires could be heard as someone shouted, "Enjoy fire." Yeah. Looking, Naruto saw a car drive by him at high speeds. Was that Bob and Lucius? He wondered aloud before seeing another car follow. Getting suspicious, he quickly ran to an alley and used his newly named Smoke Dash to dash into a vent and appear on a roof. Using his powers, Naruto could easily keep up with both cars well. It's obvious the one behind Bob and Lucius is tailing them, he thought before seeing a fire in the distance. Oh. That's why he shouted fire, said Naruto with a relieved sigh. For a moment I thought he was going to try and start one. Now knowing where they were headed, he quickly smoke dashed towards the building and accidentally crashed through the roof. He groaned as he got to work on those brakes. Looking around, he saw that you could barely see anything with the smoke, so he absorbed most of it, and kept doing that as he walked to a window, seeing Bob and Lucius run into the building wearing masks. Well, it's obvious that they are going to get everyone out of here, but the fire is too much. I'd better help, he thought as he began to absorb more smoke. After a while, Naruto went downstairs and heard Bob and Lucius shouting, "Is that everybody?" shouted Lucius as he carried a couple of people. Bob came running up to him a lot more. "Yeah, that's everyone," shouted back Bob. "It better be," shouted Lucius as part of the roof above them collapsed. He pointed his hand at the fire, but nothing happened. Bob looked confused. "Can't you put this out?" "I can't lay a layer thick enough. It's evaporating too fast," shouted Lucius, making Naruto roll his eyes. Deciding to ignore the arguing adults, Naruto ran to a wall and inspected it. This should do for an escape, he thought before running back to a wall that was between him and Bob and Lucius. Unwrapping his chain, he slashed it and quickly smoke dashed away before they could see him. After a second, Bob charged at the wall and knocked his and Lucius's way through. Good, now they're gone. Suddenly, the building started to fall with Naruto still inside. "I know I wish for something to happen, but this is ridiculous," he shouted before using smoke dash onto another building's rooftop. From his point on the roof, he could hear alarms ringing from a jeweler's store right next to the downed building. He also saw Bob and Lucius leave, so he followed them to their car and continued following as it drove off, also seeing how the car that followed was gone. "Thanks for the lift," said Bob as he got out of the car at his house. Lucius nodded before driving away and Bob entered the house. Naruto was about to leave until he remembered Violet's book. "I have to give this to her," he thought, going to the window where her room is. Luckily for him, it was open so he could turn to smoke and enter. He noticed that she wasn't in the room and that there was shouting going. He must have got caught, thought Naruto before quickly writing a note and leaving, just as the door opened. Violet yawned as she walked to her bed. She was tired and angry with herself because she didn't ask Naruto out for a date. "Maybe I'll have a better chance tomorrow," she thought, about to climb into her bed. She stopped, however, when she saw a book that wasn't there before and a note on top. Taking it, she read out loud, "Vi, you dropped this today after school, so I brought it back to you. See you at school tomorrow." Then at the bottom of the note was a chibi drawing of Naruto, as he made a peace sign. She smiled and held the note close to her as she picked up the book. She idly noticed that it smelled of smoke for some reason, but didn't think much of it as she put it away. She then put the note into the drawer before going to bed, not noticing that Naruto watched from the window. The next day, like usual, Naruto was sitting in his classroom next to Violet, both just talking about random things before the teacher started the lesson. This continued throughout the day, and we now find the two teens sitting in their tree for lunch. "So what are you planning for the holidays that are coming in a few months?" asked Naruto as he ate his lunch. Violet shrugged as she also ate her lunch. "I don't know." "What about you?" she asked. "Same," he answered with a bored expression. Just as she reached for her last piece of lunch, Violet's eyes widened as she remembered something. "Oh, my mom invited you over for dinner again tonight," she spoke with a smile, hoping he will come. Naruto smiled at that before nodding. "Sounds nice. I'll come, and since I haven't got anything else to do later today, I'll just go with you to your home after school." Hearing this, Violet smiled. "Here they come," Naruto muttered with a grin as he looked through the trees. Violet looked and rolled her eyes when she saw the girls that were bullying her along with Tony riding her, one of the most popular guys in school. The other was Naruto, but he just ignored all that, not really caring about popularity. Ever since getting over her crush on Tony, Violet noticed how he was arrogant part of the time and didn't seem to care about others a lot. What are you planning? She asked in suspicion, but the smile on her face showed she wasn't against it. Naruto gave her grin before showing a bucket full of water balloons and a few bags of flour. How did you hide that? She muttered with a raised eyebrow. Ignoring the question, Naruto just looked at her and asked back, do you want in or not? Violet didn't even have to answer as she took a balloon. Tony was flirting with the three girls, not really caring about what they say but how they look. He walked under a tree that he knew barely anyone went near and continued to flirt with the girls. Not even a second later, balloons rained down on all four of them, making the girls scream and Tony to shout in surprise. The balloons quickly stopped, and they thought it was over before they all looked up at the tree, knowing that was where it came from. Who did that? Tony shouted, but no answer came. None of them noticed Violet and Naruto walk up to them from behind with 2 big bags of flour. They dropped them on the unsuspecting teens, creating a thick cloud of flour. Both Naruto and Violet quickly ran away in case they were spotted but joined a group as a lot of people came to see what happened. When the cloud dispersed, everyone began to laugh when they saw the 4 popular teens covered in paste. It was also at that time that the bell went off, so everyone went inside, leaving the 4 teams in anger and embarrassment. For the rest of the day, a couple of the teachers tried to figure out who did it but no one knew the answer. So seeing that they could do nothing and that there were no camera in the area, they dropped the incident. But Tony and the girls were still angry at everything. At the end of the school day, both Naruto and Violet were standing outside, laughing at what happened. They stopped after a little while and just talked until they heard Dash call out Violet's name. Both walked over to the car and Violet got inside. Naruto says he can join us for dinner, she said to her mother. Hearing this, Helen smiled. That's great. Is it alright if Naruto can come to our house? He says he's got nothing else to do today, asked Violet, wanting her mother to say yes. Helen didn't need to think about it, as she looked at her son. Dash, can you sit next to Jack please? Naruto needs to sit down. Dash wanted to argue but decided against it as he climbed to the back. Violet moved over and Naruto joined her as the car drove back to the Parr's residence. When they all entered the house, Dash just ran off to his room to do random things. Naruto helped Helen with his shopping as well as Violet as they put the groceries in the kitchen. After that, Naruto sat with Violet and did their homework, and then just talked. I forgot to ask you something, said Violet as she remembered the book that was on her bed. She showed said book to Naruto. How did you get this to my room? She asked suspiciously. Naruto started to sweat as she stared, expecting an answer. He opened his mouth but no sound came. He was then saved by the bell as Bob opened the door, looking defeated. Are you okay? Asked Naruto in concern, although on the inside he was happy to get out of the question. Violet narrowed her eyes at that before dropping the conversation, but not before promising to ask him again soon. Bob didn't say anything as he went straight into his workroom. Narrowing his eyes at this, Naruto looked at his friend. I'm just going to go to the bathroom, he said as he stood. Violet nodded as she went back to watching TV. He walked away and headed down the hallway, seeing a door close. Getting curious, he pressed his ear against the door, listening until he could hear a robotic voice. Not wasting another second, he turned into smoke and went under the door before flying into the shadows so he wouldn't be seen. He watched and saw Bob writing down information as they both listened to a tablet with a silver-haired woman on it. They both groaned when they heard Helen but continued to listen until the message stopped. Naruto watched as Bob gazed in a longing manner at the wall, seeing loads of memorabilia of his hero days. After a minute the tablet printed a card that Bob took before both heard the machine say this message will self-destruct. Hearing this, both Bob and Naruto could only say one thing. Oh. A loud boom was heard but not loud enough for anyone in the house to hear. Bob ran out of the room because of all the smoke and, using it as a distraction, Naruto's smoke dashed away as he absorbed it so the smoke detectors wouldn't go off. Bob sighed in relief when the sprinklers didn't go off but then began to think about what happened. When Naruto came back to the living room, he saw Violet reading a magazine. Knowing that Bob is going to accept the job of destroying the android, he decided he was going to follow because something didn't seem right. I just remembered something, he said, getting Violet's attention. What? Asked Violet as she put down her magazine. Naruto smiled before answering. I do have plans for this weekend, or possibly all of next week, he said sadly. It's just to visit an old friend in another city. Violet's smile disappeared for a single moment before she put on a fake smile, which Naruto saw through easily. That's great, she said, trying to sound happy. When do you leave? She asked. Frowning at the obvious fake smile, he answered within the next couple of days. If not then probably sometime next week. Dinner's ready, called Helen from within the kitchen. Violet didn't say anything as she got up from her seat and walked straight into the dining room with Naruto following. Naruto sighed. Why do I have a feeling that something's going to happen and that it will either end in a good or a very, very, very bad way, he thought to himself. Next week. Naruto was thankful that he managed to get a black shirt that he attached a mask to, just like his old sensei Kakashi. He had it on as he tried his best to hold onto the aircraft that Bob was inside. Why am I doing this? He shouted to himself as the wind kept smacking his face repeatedly. It was like this for a few hours until they eventually came across an island that Naruto had to admit did look beautiful. He was cut off from his thoughts when he heard a hatch open. Looking over the edge of the aircraft, he saw a large black pod fly out before catching a glimpse of what was inside Bob. He muttered before jumping off as well. Wait, how am I supposed to land? He shouted as he fell after the pod that now had propellers to slow itself down. For a few minutes, Naruto continued to fall until he saw the pod fly into the trees. Think, Naruto, think, he thought to himself, how am I supposed to land? A light bulb then went off in his head when he remembered his powers. He got closer and closer to the ground until suddenly he was jerked upwards slightly, and then he saw that he was slowly descending to the ground. Looking at how that was happening, he saw that he was shooting off a continuous amount of smoke from his hands until he finally reached the ground. I think I'll call that smoke thrusters, he said before nodding to himself. Hearing a loud noise, Naruto looked and walked to where it sounded. When he reached it, he nearly fell over laughing when he saw Bob struggle to get out of the pod. Come on, grumbled Bob before sighing and getting back into the pod. Naruto wondered what he was doing before 3 sides of the pod exploded outwards because of Bob's strength. He's able to lift cars, smash buildings, and throw anything he picks up, but he can't pull himself out of small spaces, thought Naruto with a little chuckle. Now that's an embarrassing weakness, he thought before thinking of his own weakness. Then again, I can't use my powers in water. Looking at Bob again, Naruto had to bite down on his lip just so he wouldn't laugh as the older man stretched, showing that he was too big for his old hero suit. Once that was done, Bob began to jog in a random direction and Naruto followed after, either from a distance or from the trees. They had to stop 4 or 5 times as Bob was not fit as he once was, which annoyed Naruto because he could still go on easily. Eventually they had to stop again with Naruto lying down on a tree. He didn't see Bob examine a large mark on a tree in the ground. Suddenly, a massive round robot with 4 legs appeared out of nowhere, surprising both Naruto and Bob, with the latter dodging the robot's legs. He wasn't fast enough to avoid a light scratch to his left arm before jumping over the robot and punching it to the other side of the clearing. What? Muttered Bob when he saw the robot get up and charge at him. I'd better stay out of the way, thought Naruto, trying hard to not jump into the fight. But that doesn't mean I can't help. But how am I to do that without Bob noticing me? He thought, looking around. He watched as Bob jumped over the robot again, but as soon as he reached the apex, the robot caught him effortlessly before throwing him away. Unfortunately, he was thrown into a tree that Naruto was on, making it fall over. Not good, Naruto said loudly before smoke dashing to another tree. Thankfully Bob didn't see it, but the robot may have, he couldn't tell. He then watched as the robot retracted its legs before rolling into a few more trees and then rolling after Bob. It chased the man through the forest, with Naruto actually struggling to keep up, until they all reached a large chasm. Staying at the edge, he saw Bob dive off with the robot following after. Somehow the robot got ahead of Bob as he dove to the side, before throwing large rocks at him. He dodged the first 2, but the third got him, slamming him against the wall. Seeing a claw about to impale him, Bob jumped to the side, avoiding it as it slammed into the wall. Trying to run away, Bob never saw the robot jump into the air and then slam into the ground, knocking Bob off the edge of a chasm before following after. Naruto cursed before jumping down, thinking he should intervene soon. When he reached the bottom, he saw Bob slowly being pushed towards lava by the robot. Without thinking, Naruto charged a cinder shot and fired it at the machine, momentarily distracting it. Noticing that the robot stopped pushing for a second, Bob used that as he pushed forward and then pulled the robot's claw, making it fly into the lava. Naruto quickly hid behind some rocks in case he saw it, but was not yet, shouted Bob as he began to laugh. He then turned to his left sharply and Naruto actually cringed when he heard a loud crack, coming from Bob's back. "Ouch," muttered Naruto before widening his eyes when he saw the robot smash through the ground, showing that it was glowing because it was heated to extremely high degrees. Because the robot smashed through the ground, it caused it to split into multiple parts, with Bob in the middle of a large crack. Both he and Naruto watched as the robot revealed its claws before making them spin. Choosing between the spinning claws or the slowly floating away rock, Bob chose the safer one and jumped, even though his back was causing a lot of pain. However, this didn't stop the machine from picking him up by his legs and slam him into the ground a few times. It then grabbed his arms with another claw and tried to pull him apart. Naruto was about to jump in and help again, but stopped when he heard another crack and Bob to start laughing. He then watched as he pulled on the claw, ripping it from the robot's appendage. Dropping to the ground, Bob ran under the robot as it moved its head to under itself. Bob then ripped it off before climbing inside. Naruto watched in morbid fascination as the robot began to stab itself to try and catch the man. It then stopped and its head shot off, showing Bob as it tapped its side. He then climbed back inside as the robot reached inside and accidentally pulled out its own heart. Bob jumped out and walked away, leaving the now dead robot behind. Naruto followed after, either realizing that they were being watched. Later that night, Naruto went out around the island, seeing what the security was like. He didn't need to follow after Bob, seeing how he was just going to dinner with the man on the island, and Mirage, the woman that first spoke to Bob about all this. Why does this seem so odd, thought Naruto as he looked around, thinking about how the people here found Bob and his hero identity. Plus, the fact that the island needs such heavy security seemed weird as well. It almost seemed planned. But it can't be, he then scoffed to himself as he landed on a beach from jumping through trees. Then again, I should always look underneath, he then sighed as he stopped in a large cave. This is a lot bigger than I thought, he thought, thinking about everything that happened. When Naruto returned, he made sure to return a couple of days after Bob as to not raise suspicion. He continued for the next few months to visit Violet, but noticed that she was happy to see him again, but she also seemed mad for something he didn't know. For the next few months, he noticed that Bob continued to go to the island for random hobs. Some he followed after to see. Other times he followed and saw that he was exercising and spending times with his kids. Naruto even walked to the house and blinked when he saw two cars, one black and the other red. Although it did confuse him as to why the red one had a bow on top, until he learned it was a present for Helen. Right now he was staring at Violet in complete confusion, as they both ate their lunch in their tree at school. Everyone at school was happy because it was the last day before the holidays start. The reason Naruto was staring at Violet in confusion was because every time he left to follow her father, without her knowing of course, she would seem sad. Then when he comes back, she would act mad and not talk to him, and it was starting to annoy him. "Have I done something wrong?" asked Naruto, trying to figure out the problem. Violet just shook her head, answering but not talking as she took a bite from her sandwich. "Then why aren't you taking to me?" he asked in a loud voice. His left eye began to twitch when he saw her shrug. "You don't need to shout," said Violet in amusement. She then blushed when she saw Naruto gape at her. "What?" He pointed at her, and she could see tears of relief flowing down from his eyes. "You talk to me." At that, Violet just turned away from him. "Damn it." For the next few minutes, Violet tried to finish off some extra work but sighed in frustration. "You okay?" asked Naruto. "No," she said whilst shutting her book. "I can't figure some of this out." "Need help?" "Please," she said. "You can come with us to my home." "But my mom won't be picking us up today. Something about meeting an old friend and she won't be back until later today. Besides, it's not that far so we can just walk, but we have to go to Dash's school first, which is thankfully a couple blocks away." Naruto nodded and then the bell went. They went back to class and continued working for the next couple of hours. After that, they left school and began walking towards Dash's. They found him in front of the building, looking really bored. Once they got him, the three began to walk through a park towards the house. The reason they went through the park was because Naruto would throw a ball as far as he could and Dash would run after it with his super speed. Like Violet said, it didn't take long for them to reach the house where they entered and did random things. Naruto worked with Violet on their homework, Dash just watched TV, and after a while, they joined. Helen entered the home not long after and only Naruto noticed that she was carrying a duffel bag. She quickly said hi and just walked straight into her room. "Why was your mom carrying a duffel bag?" asked Naruto, making the other two think for a moment. Violet got up to see what was happening. Before she could say anything, Helen spoke. There's lots of leftovers you can reheat. Make sure Dash does his homework, and both of you, get to bed on time, she said with seriousness. I should be back tonight. Late. You can be in charge that long, can't you? Yeah, but why am I in charge? Asked Violet in confusion, unknown that Naruto was listening from down the hall. Nothing, answered Helen, just a little trouble with Daddy. Raising an eyebrow, Violet asked back, you mean Dad's in trouble, or Dad is the trouble? I mean he's either in trouble, or he's gonna be, she said in an angry way before closing the door to her bedroom so she could pack. Alone in her room, Helen sighed as she unzipped her duffel bag and took out 3 red suits she got from Edna Mode, a person that designs suits for any supers. Unfortunately, Dash opened the door to the bedroom and asked, What's that? Where'd you get that, Mom? Helen stretched her arm and slammed the door shut. In response, Dash just ran out of the house and to the bedroom window. You made a cool outfit. Are those for us? He asked before Helen shut the blinds, making him run to another window. We all get cool outfits? Helen closed both blinds but was not prepared for Dash to run inside and open the door whilst taking a suit. Dash, you come back here this moment. She shouted, but he didn't listen. Sighing, Helen went to the phone after hearing it ring. Hey, Snug. Thanks for getting back. I know it's short notice, but I was hoping that I could. What are these? Asked Violet as she entered the room and picked up a suit, interrupting her mother from her phone call. Naruto was right behind her looking at the suit in interest. They sort of look like Bob's suit, but it's red instead of blue. She said that Bob's in trouble or is going to be, so that must mean something happened if she's going after, thought Naruto with narrowed eyes. Dash came running into room, showing that he was now wearing the red suit that Naruto noticed had an eye on it. Look, I'm the Dash, said Dash as he began to admire himself in the mirror the Dash likes. Take that off before somebody sees you, said Helen in slight anger. Violet looked at her mother in suspicion. You're packing one just like it. Are you hiding something? Dash snuck up behind Helen and grabbed the suit that was in her hands before running next to Violet. Looking at it, he showed her. This is yours, he said, it's specially made. You're not coming and I have to pack, shouted Helen as she actually shoved her children plus Naruto out of her room. She sighed as she slumped against the door. On the other side, Violet looked at the suit before looking at her brother. What makes you think it's special? She asked. I don't know, answered Dash. Why'd Mom try to hide it? He asked back before running away. Violet and Naruto looked at each other. They look similar to super suits, or at least the one your dad has. Try something, suggested Naruto. Violet just nodded as she made her hand go invisible. Slowly, she touched it and both were shocked when the suit also turned invisible. Violet more so as Naruto was expecting some form of reaction. You and Dash are going to follow her, aren't you? Probably, said Violet. Sighing, Naruto turned around and said, I'll call a babysitter. A couple hours later. On a fast-moving jet that was flying over an ocean, Helen sat in the pilot's seat as she flew the plane. Pressing a few buttons, she spoke into the headset that she was wearing. Island approach. India Golf 9er checking in. VRF on top. Over, she waited for a response but nothing. Island Tower, this is India Golf 9er requesting vectors to the initial. Over, she, again, got no response. For some reason, her eyes landed on the duffel bag that was on the seat next to her. Pressing the autopilot button, she stood up and went to the plane's bathroom, coming out moments later wearing the suit. She then tossed the duffel bag onto another seat but stopped when she heard "Ow!" Violet! Shouted Helen when she recognized the voice. Turning visible, Violet spoke. It's not my fault. You were acting weird, so we came out to see what was happening. Dash ran up to the seat behind and agreed with Violet. So you left Jack alone with Naruto? Asked Helen, but then she saw Naruto sit up from a seat nearby. You left him alone? I called a sitter, said Naruto as she sat down next to Violet. Who? Asked Helen before Naruto answered, and she went to the phone. Looking out of the window, Violet muttered, I wonder where we're going. Naruto shrugged at that as he also looked out the window. Everyone was then cut from their thoughts when they all heard beeping. Helen quickly ran up to her seat and looked at the radar before gasping and putting on the headset. India Golf 9er transmitting in the blind guard. Disengage, repeat disengage. Flipping a switch, a sign shone, telling everyone to put their seatbelts on. Looking out of the window, Naruto's eyes widened when he saw rockets fly towards them, and that the jet just released some flares. Helen made a sharp turn, and because no one had their seatbelts on, They were lifted off their seats. Dash was fine because he held on, but Naruto had to catch Violet before she hit her head, and used his feet to hold himself on the seat in front of them. The plane continued to spin as two rockets slammed into each other, exploding. The plane stopped spinning but was now heading towards the water, and Helen just managed to pull up on time. Using the thrusts, the plane shot forward, slamming everyone back to their seats. Helen tried to get the people on the island to call off the missiles, but no luck. Turning, she shouted to her daughter Vi, "Put a force field around the plane." "But you told us not to use our powers," shouted back a terrified Violet. Naruto put a hand onto her shoulder to try and calm her. "I know what I said," shouted Helen, "but listen to what I'm saying now." She continued to try and get the people to abort, and Violet tried to put up a force field but no luck, as there was too much pressure. Seeing that the missiles were getting too close, Naruto quickly grabbed Dash and Violet and held them as Helen did the same, but she extended her body to protect them. The plane exploded, sending everything towards the ocean. Helen was unconscious due to the explosion, but everyone else was awake. Dash and Violet were screaming, but Naruto was looking around to see if there was something he could do. As everyone was distracted, he slowed his descent by using his smoke thrusters and grabbed onto a large piece of debris. Helen quickly woke up and saw that they were all falling. She quickly grabbed her children and stretched her body to that of a parachute. "Brace yourselves," shouted Helen as they all landed in the water. "Where's Naruto?" asked Violet as she looked around. Helen looked up and gasped before pushing her children underwater. "Look out!" she shouted as she too ducked to avoid a large piece of debris, slamming into the water. What no one saw though was that Naruto used his powers to launch himself towards that piece of debris before kicking it with all his strength. It may not have done much, but it did divert it slightly so it missed everyone else. He then quickly dived into the water as to avoid questions as how he got onto the debris, even though the water weakened him. When he surfaced, he saw that Violet and Dash were shouting out before Helen splashed them with water. "Shut up!" she shouted. "We are not going to die, now both of you get a grip." "So what are we going to do now?" asked Naruto. Helen stayed quiet for a moment before looking at the direction the missiles came. "Those were short-range missiles, land-based. That way is our best bet." "You want us to get towards the people that tried to kill us?" asked Dash. "If it means land, then yes." "Do you expect us to swim there?" asked Violet. Smirking, Helen answered, "I expect you to trust me." Shaping herself to that of a small boat, she looked and said, "Naruto, Vi, you both climb on. Dash, I need you to push. With your speed we'll be there soon." Everyone nodded and did as they were told, and they were off. They traveled in silence for a few hours until they finally reached a beach where Helen and Dash collapsed in exhaustion. "I'm proud of you," she said to her son, who smiled at the praise. Naruto looked around and noticed it was dark out. "We need to make camp. A cave or something will do." He then pointed. "I think I saw one when he swam here." He lied, knowing that there was a cave there because of his time on the island before. Everyone agreed with him and walked towards the direction he pointed until they found a large, secluded cave. They made a fire and just sat there, calming themselves down. Violet and Dash were thinking about what happened. Helen was trying to think of a way to tell her kids the truth, and Naruto was wondering if he was going to reveal his powers. "Chances are, I will," he thought. Naruto spoke. "Helen," getting the older blonde's attention, "can you wait outside the cave for a few minutes, please? I need to talk to my kids in private," she said, with Naruto nodding and leaving. "I think your father is in trouble," she said with a sigh, "so I'm going to look for him. Naruto's in charge while I'm gone." "What?" shouted Dash. Violet smirked, not bothered by it. "You heard her." Reaching into her duffel bag, Helen took out 3 masks and put one on. "Put these on," she said. "Your identity is your most valuable possession." Protected Dash put the mask on and smiled as Violet took her own, but she didn't put it on. "And if anything goes wrong, use your powers." "But you said," began Violet, but was interrupted. "I know what I said," shouted Helen before taking a deep breath. "Remember the bad guys on those shows you used to watch on Saturday mornings? Well, these guys are not like those guys. They won't exercise restraint because you're children. They will kill you if they get the chance," she said with absolute seriousness. "Do not give them that chance. Vi, I'm counting on you to be strong." "Mom. Be strong," spoke Helen to her daughter before looking at her son Dash. "If anything goes wrong, I want you to run as fast as you can." "As fast as I can?" repeated Dash. Smiling, Helen answered as fast as you can. Stay hidden, keep each other safe. I'll be back by morning. Hugging them, Helen turned and ran out of the cave, seeing Naruto sitting on a tree. I'm sorry that you're here. Don't be, said Naruto. I would have come no matter what anyway. He then noticed the mask. Nice mask, he complimented. I wish you had one, said Helen. At least that way no one will be able to identify you. Naruto just smiled. No problem, he said before pulling up his own mask that covered the lower part of his face, and then his hood. Glad I had this attached. Helen just shook her head anyway. I know you don't have any powers, but please, help them any way you can. Nodding, Naruto just moved out of the way as Violet came out of the cave. Mom, she said sadly. Mom, what happened on the plane? I am sorry. Tears began to creep up on her eyes, but they didn't fall. I wanted to help, but when you asked me to, I'm sorry. Shushing her daughter, Helen gently smiled. It isn't your fault. It wasn't fair for me to suddenly ask so much from you. But things are different now, and doubt is a luxury we cannot afford anymore, sweetie. You have more power than you realize. Don't think, and don't worry. When the time comes, you'll know what to do, she said as she brushed some of Violet's hair behind her ear before running away. Violet stayed where she was as Naruto came out of the tree he was on. She's right, you know, he spoke, getting her attention. All you have to do is believe in yourself and protect those you care about, then you will be stronger. With that, he went back inside the cave, leaving Violet alone with her thoughts. Looking down at the mask in her hands, Violet thought about what her mother and Naruto said. After a minute, she put the mask on and smiled before walking into the cave as well, seeing Naruto laying on the ground and Dash looking bored again. Sitting next to Naruto and the fire, Violet began to practice using her force fields. After watching her doing this for a few minutes, Dash stood up. Well, not that this isn't fun, but I'm gonna go look around, he said as he took a stick with a flame on top. What do you think is going on here? Asked Violet rhetorically. Do you think we're on vacation? Mom and Dad's lives could be in jeopardy. Or worse, their marriage, she whispered in the end. Their marriage? Repeated Dash, not really believing that. Violet nodded. So the bad guys are trying to wreck Mom and Dad's marriage. Forget it, spoke Violet with a frown. You're so immature. Dash nodded to himself as he turned around. I'm gonna go look around. Mom said to stay hidden, said Violet. I'm not gonna leave the cave, shouted back Dash as he continued to walk deeper into the cave. Violet just sighed at her brother before looking at Naruto. Even with everything going on, she couldn't help but be thankful that he was with her. Do you think this is going to affect my parents' marriage? She asked in embarrassment. Naruto looked at her, then thought for a second. I'll admit that this could be a bump on the road, but I doubt it could be anything serious, so you don't have to worry. He then looked at the deeper part of the cave with narrowed eyes. You know, this is weird. What? Why is this cave this deep? Dash should have reached the end by now. Plus it is a weird shape, he said, gesturing to the cave. Most are round, almost like a circle, but this is more oval. They both stayed silent as they thought about it. They heard Dash's voice echo. Looking, they saw that the end of the cave was starting to glow before Dash appeared and started to pull them towards the exit. They managed to get out and away from the cave as fire rocketed out of it, burning everything. Hearing a noise, they all looked towards the volcano and saw a rocket flying out of it. Sighing, Naruto looked at the others and said, come on, we need to find a place to rest for the night. They nodded and followed him until they eventually found a very small clearing. Dash went up against a tree and fell asleep quickly as Naruto leaned against another one. Violet joined him on that tree. You okay? He asked in concern. Nodding, she smiled. I'm alright, thanks, just tired. Smiling, Naruto said, then rest, he said softly, watching as her eyes began to get heavy and close. Good night. Without saying anything, Violet drifted off to sleep as her head fell onto his shoulder. Naruto didn't do anything until he wrapped an arm around her and closed his eyes, finding this quite peaceful. Next morning, Dash woke up first as he stretched. Looking around, memories of yesterday came back to his mind as he looked at the forest in wonder. He barely saw any of it as he only saw it during nighttime, so it looked completely different to him during the day. Naruto woke up not long after, but he didn't get up as he felt a light weight on his chest. Looking down, he saw Violet snuggling to his chest with a small, happy smile. Looking around, he saw Dash was awake before his eyes landed on a blue bird. What the hell? That was everywhere when I was on this island before, and I can't find what kind it is, he thought before Dash noticed it. Identification, please, it spoke, making Naruto widen his eyes. Vi, he said, shaking the girl as he kept his eyes on the bird. Vi, wake up. We need to move, now. Groggily waking up, Violet rubbed her eyes before looking at Naruto. Looking around, she saw that she was laying on him, making her eep and jump off. I am so sorry, she said loudly. It's alright, said Naruto, and he would be lying if he said that he didn't enjoy it. Violet noticed that he was looking at something, so she followed his gaze and saw the blue bird. Voice key incorrect, the bird said. Why is it saying that? Asked Dash. Voice key incorrect, it spoke again before its eyes turned red and it opened its beak, showing a speaker before a loud alarm went off. They all covered their ears in pain because of the noise. Then Naruto reached inside his hoodie and pulled out a shuriken before throwing it, destroying the bird and its alarm, but it was too late as more went off. This way! Shouted Naruto as he grabbed Violet's hand and the three started to run deeper into the forest. They had to stop eventually because when they reached another clearing, a bunch of men in uniform, carrying guns, jumped off of their vehicles and aimed at them. As the men were surrounding them, Violet whispered to Dash, remember what Mom said. Dash looked at her sister in confusion. Run. Realizing what she meant, even though it was obvious, he ran into the forest with a couple following him. Violet turned invisible. Show yourself, ordered one of the guards as he looked around for her. The last guard walked up to Naruto with his gun pointed at him at all times. Don't you do anything, he warned, making Naruto smirk. Just as he got close enough, Naruto grabbed the gun and pushed it, making it smack the guard in the face. I am so thankful I read up on guns, he thought as he started to separate the gun into pieces, making it useless. Seeing the guard coming at him, he grabbed his fist and punched the man in the gut, making him double over. Then he jumped up and spun kicked the man away, knocking him out easily. Turning to Violet, he saw that a guard was still looking for her, and that behind him was a floating stick. I know you're there, little miss, disappear, said the man before the stick whacked him against the back of his head. Thinking that the fight was finished, Violet turned visible again, only for the guard to knock her off her feet. Rolling to his gun, the man aimed at Violet and fired, but missed as she ran away, invisible. Running in the direction he saw her go, he followed and saw a splash in a pond. Not knowing where she was exactly, he grabbed some dirt and threw it in, making it flow into the water and showed where she was. There you are, he said, about to kill the teen girl. Hey! Shouted Naruto as he used his chain and wrapped it around the guard's throat, forcing him to stop and try and free his throat. Yanking on the chain, the man was thrown onto the ground, releasing him from the chain, letting him gasp for air. Violet used that to run out of the water and hide behind a tree, and Dash appeared nearby. When the man quickly caught his breath, he reached for his gun and aimed at Naruto, before seeing Dash and fired at him. Violet and Naruto reacted and dove in front, but Violet's instincts went off, allowing her to create a stable force field around her and her brother. Naruto was just outside it, but the force field was between him and the guard. I told you, you could do it, Vi, said Naruto with a smile. How are you doing that? Shouted Dash in amazement. Violet was just as shocked as she shouted back, I don't know. Getting an idea, Naruto shouted to them, Vi, keep up the force field. Dash, you run. I'll follow. They nodded, even though they knew he couldn't run as fast as them. Dash began to run inside the force field, making it roll in a direction. Naruto ran beside them until they kept getting further away. When he was alone, he smirked. Finally, he said, aiming his hands at the guard that was following. Using his powers, he used a smoke shot, knocking the man unconscious. Quickly running up a tree, he began to smoke dash his way through the forest, following the direction the others went in and the noise of gunfire. After a few minutes he came out to the end of the forest, seeing the entire Parr family, minus Jack of course, surrounded by guards and their flying vehicles. Without thinking, he jumped down in front of everyone and concentrated his power into his chain, causing it to glow red and have smoke wisps around it. Everyone's eyes widened as they saw Naruto use the chain to slice through one of the guards' vehicle, before putting the chain away and firing smoke shots at the ones on the ground. Seeing one fly towards Naruto from behind, Bob quickly punched it to the ground, and Helen stretched her leg and kicked one off. There was only one left, and Naruto saw the only vehicle on the ground. Hey! He shouted, getting Bob's attention. Throw that at me. Bob hesitated before doing as he was told, and Naruto wrapped his chain around it, making his power flow through it before making smash into another, ending the fight. You have powers? shouted Violet to Naruto when everyone calmed down enough to think, why didn't you tell me? Naruto didn't know what to say. Think, he thought in his head, trying to think of an excuse that would help, but nothing. Hearing a sound, he narrowed his eyes. I'll explain later. There's more coming. As if on cue, more guards appeared, but this time the family plus Naruto were ready. Dash ran around the family, creating a tornado of dust that blocked everyone else from view. One of the guards just started to fire at the cloud of dust, before it departed and showed Violet using her force fields to block the bullets. 2 more guards came up behind her, but Helen kicked one away from where she stood, and Naruto's smoke dashed past the second before grabbing him from behind and slamming him into the ground. Another guard aimed at Helen, but Bob grabbed him and punched him. Just as they were about to do more, 2 blue lasers appeared out of nowhere. One paralyzed Bob and Helen, whilst the other paralyzed Naruto, Violet, and Dash. Whoa! 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 Shouted a new voice. From the corner of his eye, Naruto saw that it was a man that wore a black and white suit with a large S on the front and also had long orange hair that pointed upwards. Time out. He shouted as he smirking evilly. What have we here? Matching uniforms? He said as he moved them together before chuckling darkly. Elastigirl? You married Elastigirl? Then his eyes widened and got busy. It's a whole family of supers. Except for the smoky one. Naruto widened his eyes at that. Yeah, I know about you. My cameras caught you when you followed Mr. Incredible here and sneaking around my base. After a while, Naruto and the Parrs were taken to the cell block and all now had metal spheres on their hands and feet as a type of magnetism kept them in the air. I have an itch, commented Naruto, but either no one heard him or they ignored him. As they were suspended in the air, the now known syndrome, to everyone but Bob, was showing the news. On it was Metroville and that a massive object landed in it. Oh, come on! He shouted, you gotta admit, this is cool. Just like a movie, the robot will emerge dramatically, do some damage. Throngs of screaming people. And just when all hope is lost, Syndrome will save the day. He then turned and glared at Bob. I'll be a bigger hero than you ever were. You mean you killed off real heroes so that you could pretend to be one? Asked Bob angrily. I am real, said Syndrome as he turned around and again glared at Bob. Real enough to defeat you. And I did it without your precious gifts, your oh-so-special powers. I'll give them heroics, the most spectacular heroics anyone has ever seen. And when I'm old and had my fun, I'll sell all my inventions so that everyone can be superheroes, everyone can be super. And when everyone's super. He paused as he began to laugh evilly whilst walking away before frowning. No one will be. Everyone watched the news as the robot, that they learned was called Omnidroid, began attacking the city and defeating the army. Bob sighed as he hung his head in shame. I'm sorry, he said, this is all my fault. I've been a lousy father. Blind to what I have, so obsessed with being undervalued, that I undervalued all of you. He then looked at Helen, not seeing Violet put a force field around herself, which stopped her being trapped. He also didn't notice Naruto turning into smoke and appearing next to Violet. Dad? Said Dash, but Helen shushed him. So caught up in the past that he trailed off. Both Naruto and Violet were now at the controls. You were my greatest adventure, and I almost missed it. But I swear, I'm going to get us out of this safely. He got interrupted as Violet began to talk. Well, I think Dad has made some excellent progress today, but I think it's time we wind down now, she said as she pressed a button, releasing everyone from their restraints. We need to get back to the mainland, said Bob as they all ran down a hall. There's an aircraft hangar, straight ahead I think, said Helen before they came to a door. Bob opened it before looking around in confusion. Where are all the guards? Celebrating, said Naruto as they all entered the hangar, and some are in that van. I think everyone ran up to it as both Bob and Naruto went to the open door. Sulfur bomb, he whispered as he created a small ball of smoke. The guards in the van popped the cork to a bottle of champagne, which Bob caught. Naruto tossed the ball inside just as Bob closed the door. When coughing was heard, Bob opened it again before going inside and beating them unconscious. When he came out, they all ran along the hangar. This is the right hangar, but I don't see any jets. A jet's not fast enough, said Bob. Giving him a questioning look, Helen asked, what's faster than a jet? Hey! Shouted Dash, getting everyone's attention. How about a rocket? Running up to him, everyone saw a rocket all prepped and ready to fly. Great, commented Helen. I can't fly a rocket. You don't have to, said Violet. Just use the coordinates from the last launch. Everyone smiled at the idea before Bob frowned. Wait, I bet Syndrome changed the password by now. How do we get into the computer? Say please, said a voice. Looking, they saw Mirage smiling down at them from a window. Not long after, another rocket was flying over the ocean and was now nearing Metroville. It separated, showing a black glider carrying a can and Helen, carrying said van as she held onto the glider. Inside the van, Bob was sitting in the driver's seat as the others were sitting behind him, with Dash looking bored. Are we there yet? He asked. We get there, when we get there, said Bob in annoyance. He then opened the window, making all the paper fly. About how you doing, honey? He shouted to his wife so she could hear. Do I have to answer? She shouted back. When they got closer to the city, Bob told everyone, kids, strap yourselves in like I told you. Dash and Violet went straight to their seats and put their seat belts on. Naruto grabbed onto the table in front of him and held on for dear life. Ready, Violet? He asked, seeing Violet ready to press a button now. With that, Violet slammed the button, making the glider split. Helen shouted out before letting go of both halves of the glider and quickly climbing inside the van. This is gonna be rough. He then pressed his foot down on the accelerator. The van slammed down on the road before continuing to drive the robots in the financial district. Which exit? Traction Avenue, answered Helen. That will take me downtown, said Bob. What about 7th? He asked as he leaned the car towards that exit. Don't take 7th, shouted Helen, making Bob drive away from it. Bob frowned. Great, he said sarcastically, we missed it. You asked me how to get there, and I told you, said Helen. Exit at Traction. That will take me downtown, said Bob, as the van started to come at the exit. Seeing the exit, Helen said, it's coming up, get in the right lane. Signal. We don't exit at Traction. You're gonna miss it, screamed Helen, making Bob shout in annoyance as he swerved the van. They drove down, avoiding cars that neared them. Bob hit the brakes, but that made the van swerve slightly and slam its back into a parked car, causing Violet to scream. Trying to control the vehicle, Bob slammed both his feet down onto the brakes, causing the back wheels to stop. The van turned to its side before tumbling across the road. It continued tumbling until it finally stopped, and it conveniently stopped in a parking space in a perfect parallel parking. Taking a deep breath, Bob turned and asked, is everyone okay back there? Super duper, Dad, said Violet with a giggle. Let's do that again, said Dash with a laugh. How about no, said Naruto as he entered the vehicle, looking annoyed if his twitching eye was any indication. Seeing the questioning looks, he answered, I got knocked out of the van when it started tumbling. Thankfully, I used my powers to stop myself getting injured, he said in annoyance. Suddenly, everyone looked ahead of the van when they saw the Omnidroid appear. Wait here and stay hidden, said Bob, I'm going in. He exited the vehicle, followed by Helen as she stopped him. And I watched helplessly from the sidelines? She asked in anger. They're having an argument now, thought Naruto with a sweat drop as they argued. By now they could be fighting the Omnidroid, but they weren't. Looking at Bob, Naruto saw that he was at his breaking point. I can't lose you again, he shouted, picking his wife up before sighing and gently placing her on the ground. I can't. Not again. I'm not strong enough. Helen didn't know what to say before she kissed him. After a second, she stopped and said, if we work together, we won't have to. She sounded like Haku there, thought Naruto, remembering the words that were spoken to him and that he believed in. Violet's scream broke everyone from their thoughts as the Omnidroid finally saw them and destroyed the van. They tried to run for cover, but only Bob and Helen made it safely. Dash. No! She screamed as it attacked. Violet was quick to put up a force field, but it was putting a lot of strain of her as she tried to protect Naruto and Dash. The Omnidroid hit the barrier a couple of times, but it did nothing, so it slammed its entire body down on it, shattering it. Violet was blown back and lost consciousness for a moment. Damn! Shouted Naruto as he saw the Omnidroid about to slam its body again. Bob was quick to intervene as he used his strength to stop it. Helen pulled her kids out, Smoke dashed to the other side of it, and began to fire some shots at it, but nothing was working. He was then whacked aside as Bob was picked up and thrown through a building. Looking for the original Incredible, it was suddenly body slammed by Bob onto the ground. Frozone! He shouted out, making Naruto look and see a new man appear using ice. Wait, ice? He questioned out loud before widening his eyes. When he recognized who it was, Lucius, he muttered with a smirk, "I bet his wife is not happy with him," he thought with a chuckle before wincing when he saw the man get smacked into a car. Looking, he saw Bob get smacked like he did into a building, before the gigantic machine went after Helen, firing bolts of energy. "Syndrome's remote!" shouted Bob as he held a device in his hand. Naruto facepalmed at that. "Don't shout it out!" shouted Naruto before seeing Bob get picked up and pressing a few buttons. The Omnidroid's entire arm was then ejected off of its body. Thinking he could try and get it from the inside, Naruto smoke dashed to the Omnidroid, but as soon as he got close, it reverted into its ball form and rolled away. "It knows my powers. So Syndrome did see me use my powers. He must have known about my vent dash," then he thought with a curse before dodging an energy bolt. He saw that Bob had thrown the remote to Dash, who was running away to get the remote further from the Omnidroid. Looking at the robot, he aimed at its gun before firing, but it kept missing, not being fast enough to hit it. The gun was then destroyed as Helen threw a sewer cover at it, just as Frozone helped Dash. But that didn't stop the robot to roll after them and then jump high into the air before slamming into the water that was in the city's Parr, creating a massive wave that threw Dash and Frozone away. Both Naruto and Bob saw the remote land on the ground and both ran after it. Just as Bob reached it, the Omnidroid fired one of its claws, capturing Bob, who, in turn, grabbed onto Naruto by accident, sending them to the end of the road. As Naruto tried to help Bob out of the claw, Frozone froze the ground and Helen tripped the Omnidroid onto its side, allowing Violet to get the remote. She pressed a few buttons before the Omnidroid had its rockets turned on at the end of its claws, making it fly into a building. Dash took the remote and pressed a button, but nothing happened to the robot. Instead, the claw that had trapped Bob sprung open, sending him and Naruto flying. "We can't stop it," said Bob, getting Naruto's attention. "The only thing that can penetrate it is." He then stopped and widened his eyes before looking at the claw itself. "That's not going to be enough," said Naruto. "I can help out, but you need to throw that thing when I say, alright?" Bob just nodded as he picked up the claw. At that time, Helen took the remote and pressed a button that turned to rockets on the end of the claw. Naruto began to concentrate as smoke began to swirl around him. Helen pressed another button, but that turned the rocket off. "Wait a minute," muttered Bob before he shouted to his wife, "Press that button again." Hearing him, Helen did as she was told but didn't know what button, so she guessed, causing the claw to begin to rotate like a drill. "No. The other one, the first one." "First button, got it," she shouted back, ready to press the button. Frozone tried to stall the robot, but it didn't work as it got closer. "Press it," shouted Bob. "Not yet," shouted back Helen. "You only have one shot, and we have to make this count." Just as the Omnidroid got close enough, Naruto shot off into the air before shouting, "Now!" down to Bob, just as Helen pressed the button. "Everybody duck!" shouted Bob, releasing the claw, which shot off towards the Omnidroid. Naruto reached the apex in his flight and dove straight towards the machine, with a spinning ball of smoke in his hands. The claw slammed its way through the Omnidroid, taking its heart with it. "Orbital Rasengan!" Naruto shouted as he slammed all the way through the Omnidroid from its head to the ground. Everything was silent for a second before it toppled over onto the water and exploding. When everything calmed down, Naruto walked over to the Parr family and Lucius. "Hey Zone," greeted Bob to his friend. Lucius laughed before noticing Naruto. "Who is this?" he asked, not recognizing him. "You know, your wife is going to kill you," said Naruto, moving his mask down a bit. "Naruto," muttered Lucius as he shook his head. "She'll nag at me later," he said with a laugh as a crowd formed around them and cheered. "Remind me of old times," he said, making Bob laugh and slap his back. "Yeah," he said with a wince. "Hurt then too." No one noticed Syndrome on a building, glaring down at them before flying off. An hour later. "So you're from another world, and you've only had your powers for a few months?" asked Violet with wide eyes as everyone listened to Naruto's story. He nodded as Helen reached for the car's phone, since they were all now in a small limo thanks to Rick, and called her home. "Yep, and that is what I meant when I said I have secrets of my own," Naruto replied with a nod, his mask and hood down. Bob looked at Naruto from his seat. "And you followed me to the island since I first went there?" "Not every time," he answered before looking at Violet, who was sitting next to him. "I lied about going to see an old friend and I shouldn't have kept my powers from you," he said sadly, looking down at his feet. He felt a hand on his shoulder, so he looked and saw Violet smiling at him. "I forgive you." To be honest, I was worried that your friend was an old girlfriend or something, she said shyly, whilst making it obvious for Naruto. But being who he is, Naruto stayed oblivious as he looked confused. Why would you be worried about that? He asked. Thankfully, Bob was too busy talking to hear them. To answer his question, Violet leaned over slightly and kissed his cheek, making them both blush. I really like you, she confessed. For a while now she was going to say more, but Naruto leaned over and kissed her on the lips, making her eyes widen in shock and happiness. I really like you too, Naruto said with a smile as he leaned back a bit. Violet couldn't stop smiling as she leaned on him slightly, allowing him to wrap an arm around her. Looking at everyone else, he saw Dash's surprised and disgusted look on his face because of what he saw. Bob was still talking to Rick, and Helen was looking worried as she listened to the phone. Bob, listen to this, said Helen urgently as Bob leaned over to hear. Both their eyes widened as they listened to their messages. I never called a replacement babysitter. The limo stopped outside the Parr's house and they all ran inside, before getting paralyzed by syndrome. Looking at him, everyone saw him hold Jack. The baby's sleeping, he said in a whisper before laughing. You took away my future, he said with an angry frown. I'm simply returning the favor. Don't worry, I'll be a good mentor, supportive and encouraging. Everything you weren't. And in time, who knows, he might make a good sidekick. Then he swung the family and Naruto away before destroying the roof. He gave an evil laugh as he flew to his floating jet that was above him. He's getting away, Bob! Screamed Helen in fear. We have to do something. They all ran outside before looking confused when Syndrome stopped and dropped a bit. What's happening? Asked Helen. Looking closely, Naruto saw Jack was now metal before turning back to normal. He then began to shake a lot, freaking Syndrome, before looking like a small red monster. Everyone watched, as Syndrome was getting beat up by the baby. Stop him, Bob, throw something. I might hit Jack, shouted Bob as they tried to think of something. Throw me, whispered Helen as Jack destroyed one of Syndrome's jet boots, causing the villain to fly up uncontrollably and into the wing of his plane. Jack was accidentally dropped as he turned back to normal. Bob, throw me. Bob didn't have time to think as he picked up his wife and threw her to their baby. She caught him before stretching her body into a type of parachute. Syndrome finally managed to land in his plane and shouted, This isn't over. I will get your son, eventually. Bob looked around to see if he could throw something until he saw his car. He picked it up and threw it, not knowing that Naruto had climbed on. Syndrome gasped when he saw the car slam into his plane, but he held on. Looking, he saw Naruto glaring at him before getting picked up by his shirt. This is for everything you've done. He shouted as he literally punched Syndrome out of the plane, before jumping out himself. Syndrome was sucked into the jet's engine, destroying it completely and killing him. Naruto landed at the same time as Helen, although he made some spider cracks because of his landing. Everyone quickly huddled together as Violet put up a strong force field that protected them from the destroyed jet. That's my girl, said Helen to her daughter, proud of what she's done. Does this mean we have to move again? Asked Dash, looking at the remains of his family's house. I hope not, said Naruto as he put an arm around Violet's waist. Helen smiled, happy at them two being together. Bob just grumbled, promising himself to talk to Naruto later, before everyone widened their eyes when they saw a small boy stare at them. Bob recognized the boy from whenever he got home. That was totally wicked. The boy shouted, making everyone laugh. 3 months later. After everything that's happened, things in the city have calmed down. All the damage was fixed, and people have begun to support supers as they return, even though Syndrome killed off most of them. Right now the family plus Naruto were at the Metroville Stadium, getting ready to watch Dash run in a race. As Violet talked to one of her new friends, thanks to her new self-confidence, Naruto snuck up behind her. When he reached her, he wrapped his arms around her and spun her around with a laugh, making her squeal in surprise. Naruto gently placed her on the ground as she turned around and gave him a kiss. I was wondering if you wanted to go see a movie later this weekend? He asked her. Violet smiled. I'll buy the popcorn and you buy the tickets, she said, walking up the steps to her seat. Naruto followed after with a happy smile before sitting down with his arm around his girlfriend. The starting gun went off, signaling all the racers to start. The Parr family and Naruto began to shout to Dash, as he started to run faster, before shouting at him to slow down. None of them noticed the guy sitting next to them look at them weirdly. Dash got the message before running, just enough to be awarded second place. As the family and Naruto walked to the car, they stopped when a massive drill drilled through the earth. It stopped, and its top opened to reveal a very filthy man with a hard hat on and mechanical hands. Behold, the Underminer. He shouted to a speaker system, I am always beneath you, but nothing is beneath me. I hereby declare war on peace and happiness. The man continued to talk as Bob looked at his family, who all had their masks on as well as Naruto, before putting his own mask on. Thanks for watching this video. You really enjoy this video. Like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow King Namikaze for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.